This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
All right, good morning, Mike.
Hello.
Good morning, everyone. Our favorite time of year, of course. You were probably the fastest presentation next to Ed that we ever had. So. We put you before the Board of Ed because they might go a little bit longer than you. If you could take us through your proposal, Bill?
Certainly. If we look at the line items in the budget, most of the line items are staying the same. I can just speak quickly to the estimated expenditures. You'll see the maintenance contracts is estimated to be over by about $22,000. That's due to some security enhancements, quite significant ones to our networking, as is the request for next year. It's about $45,840 more than I normally do. That's to pick up on security enhancements that will help our network guard against the most recent threats that we experience. Under consultants and software, the line will remain the same for next year, but you'll see an anomaly there in an expenditure of $50,000. That's for the Viewpoint Cloud software, an upgrade to our building permit software presently that's currently being implemented. So that's what that is. Moving to capital, what I'm requesting this year is at the Northeast Volunteer Firehouse, we now have a full-time deputy fire chief there. And what I'm asking for is this $17,500 is to run fiber to that location. Since it's a permanent office, I'd like to extend our network to there permanently, as opposed to what we're currently doing, which is using Comcast remotely to connect that office. So that's what that is. In January 14th of 2020, Windows 7 hits end of useful life with Microsoft. So I'm requesting a total of 35 replacement desktops, physical desktops, for Town Hall and Town Hall Annex. That will get us to Windows 10 and move forward from there, getting away from Windows 7.
We're still running 7?
We're still running 7 on all of our equipment, yes. We'll also be bringing forward under existing budget lines our virtual desktops to a Windows 10 environment by that time. Our SAN, I'm looking to expand the hard drive space because there's a lot more utilization in media, videos, pictures, etc., which is using more and more hard disk space. And though our SAN has a lot of hard disk space currently, it's used in redundant fashion. So the actual usable disk space, if I have 8 terabytes, let's say, we're really using 2. The other 6 are redundant to carry forward so that we don't lose any data. So I'm looking to expand those hard drives to SSD drives, which will allow faster access to the data and improve performance at the desktop level when people are looking for their files.
But isn't the life on the SSDs really short?
They've gotten better. It used to be that too many overwrites would cause them to fail, but the technology's gotten much better. So.
I thought you might know too. Weren't they like 5-year lives?
Yeah,
But these are enterprise disks. These aren't like the kind you buy in a home computer.
Okay.
And they're also warranted and protected that way. We have 2 physical domain controllers. A domain controller allows us to, when users authenticate, they authenticate to a domain controller. One is for town services, one is for emergency services. Our current physical domain controllers are actually reutilization of old file servers, so they're really hitting a point where they should be replaced. They're currently about 8 years old, and though we have backup domain controllers to them, so we're operational, it's time to change those physical controllers, and that's what that last item is for replacement domain controllers.
As far as the data and the need for the additional space, do we archive any of the data currently? Do we have archive strategy, or?
We back it up as far as it's backed up, going back on a daily backup, and we also replicate to the high school on a daily basis and for off-site backup. We don't we keep everything live. Because we don't know who's going to access what on a given day. We do ask people to monitor what their utilization is and try to keep that down. If there's, say, pictures from 7 years ago, do they still need to be out there, or can they be moved to a portable drive? We'll ask them to monitor it that way to try to keep the space conservative. But I'm just noticing more and more I'm having to increase available hard disk space on resources. And I anticipate that in order to maintain redundancy, I'm going to need to increase that. Also, by going from, by incorporating more SSD capability, we can improve performance. And that's one of the things I've been hearing is that there's been a little bit of sluggishness at times in referencing files. This will help with that.
Yeah, just for the future, I mean, now, like, the town clerk, she's always archiving, paper.
Yes.
It's going to turn into being an IT issue years to come, where
I
we're going to
agree.
have to have some kind of archiving strategy where beyond a certain year, you have to go over here and pull records up. That's the only reason why I was
and your
asking.
point's well taken, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Bill, I have a question, although frankly,
Yes.
it's probably more for the board than yourself. But were the other board members aware that the deputy fire chief was at Northeast?
Well, it's an additional deputy fire chief, Scott Martis.
I don't think that I knew that
Yeah,
until
we
I
knew
read
that.
this.
Ed and I knew that, yeah. So,
Anything else for Bill? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And if you can get yourself set up.
so I'd like to just say a few things on behalf of Dr. Cronin as he's getting to the table. Ladies and gentlemen here, and of course those watching on TV, this will be Dr. Cronin's last workshop session. And I just want to say on behalf of Dr. Cronin that it's been a great pleasure to have worked with him these past 8 years. He's been a wonderful gentleman. We've had a great relationship. He's done an outstanding job in our school system. And Bob, as you approach your last workshop session, I want to personally thank you for everything you've done. I'd also like to say we have another man here who I also have a great deal of respect for, the incoming superintendent, Mr. Patrick Stirk. Patrick has been the principal at Ridge Road School. We've worked together very well on various projects at Ridge, and Patrick, we're going to be looking forward to working with you as superintendent. And I'd like to also introduce this fine man here, who on an interim basis has really done a great job on the Board of Ed as the finance manager, business manager, working with Ed Swinkowski, working with me at Town Hall, Frank Connolly. Frank, thank you for your efforts on this interim basis. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Frieda, I also wanted to introduce Pam Mangini, who is the new business manager for the Board of Education.
Welcome, Pam. Heard a lot of good things about you.
Welcome all.
Thank you.
You are welcome to attend future meetings or sit in the audience if you like,
Thank you.
just to,
I'll leave my phone number and email.
if you'd like to take us through your presentation.
Okay, I'd like to just say a couple of things to get us started. Thank you again for giving us the opportunity to speak with you this morning. The Board of Education's budget request for the 2019-2020 academic year totals $54,609,636. In dollars, that represents an increase of $1,556,800 over the current Board of Education budget. And as a percentage, the proposed budget represents an increase of 2.9. There are,
Dr. Cronin, I'm looking at a handout that we got, and the total is not the same as what you just said.
About 20,000 different.
Yeah. right.
Okay.
The original one that I got at your budget workshop,
Oh, we have another one since the board adopted.
this one is dated the 19th of January.
January 17th, that's the one?
Slightly different than the figure you just gave.
$1,537,477.
Okay.
20,000.
Slightly different, okay.
Do you want to know what it is?
Mr. Monaco just told me.
Okay.
Thank you. So there are no new positions requested in next year's budget. And as we set out to develop the budget for the upcoming school year, we began by identifying our priorities, which is something we do every year. And then throughout the budget development process, these priorities serve as what we call our non-negotiables. And what that means is that we did everything in our power to preserve those priorities, even if it meant cutting or reducing spending in other line items. This year, the decision to limit our priorities to only 4 was very much a conscious one. This budget was designed primarily as a maintenance budget, designed to preserve programs and services for students. To be practical, we realized that we need to give staff next year time to master all that we've introduced to them over the past few years. I just want to give you a few examples of those initiatives. We have made significant changes in the way in which we are teaching reading and writing at the elementary and the middle school levels, and that work is extending into the high school next year. We have the introduction of the next generation science standards, beginning in kindergarten and continuing through 12th grade. We are preparing students for the new science assessment, which will be on those next generation science standards, and that will be administered to all 5th, 8th, and 11th graders. We have a new standards-based elementary report card that we introduced this year. We have introduced into the district at the middle school and the high school interventionists who are working with our lowest performing 25% of the students. We're delivering more special education services at this point within the general education classroom with goals and objectives directly tied to grade level standards in language arts and math. This is an attempt for us to ramp up our efforts to close the achievement gap between students receiving special education and those who are not. And we monitor our special education subgroup very closely and would like to bring their performance more in line with how our students not receiving special education are performing. We've had numerous technology upgrades, including technology teachers and a formal technology curriculum at the elementary and middle school levels. And I could go on, but those are just the ones that came to mind off the top of my head. There are 3 items that account for approximately 80% of the budget at Board of Education's budget: contractual obligations. And these obligations, as you know, are determined through collective bargaining agreements. The North Haven Public Schools employs 512 people. There are separate collective bargaining units representing the administrators, the teachers and other certified staff, another for non-certified and support staff, one for custodians, and another for nurses. The second is health insurance, and the increase that we've presented is based on the most recent recommendation from our insurance brokers and also based on claims history. And transportation. And just remind everyone that while this does include our general transportation to each of the schools every day, it also includes special education transportation, athletics, field trips, transportation to technical schools, magnet schools, and VOAG schools. So when you total the increases of those 3 areas, it actually is greater than the total amount of the budget increase being requested. And what we were able to do was to look for cost savings and find cost savings measures and make reductions in other line items, which I'll get into in just a minute. The 2019-2020 budget presented to you will allow the Board of Education to achieve 4 priorities. The first is to meet all of its contractual obligations. The second is to preserve all certified and non-certified staff positions. The third is to maintain our focus on improving the achievement of all students. And then 4 is to continue to increase and strengthen student and staff access to technology. The quality of our school system in the end is determined by the quality of the people we employ. and the relationship between and among everyone who has a part to play in making our system work. Our school system must be accountable for student learning. We owe that to the community, to our families, and most importantly, to our students, to provide the absolute best education possible. We rely on partnerships to achieve those goals. Students need strong support from their families, and they need strong educators to be successful. But the families and schools can't do it alone. They also need the backing and support from the community. In North Haven, I've been continuously reminded of how fortunate we are to have that necessary backing and support, and I thank all of you for that. Before we begin our discussion, I'm going to highlight a few of the line items that have significant changes between this year and last year, or the coming year and our current year, and then provide some explanation for those changes. If you could go to the first section of the book, after the first blue tab. Thank you. So
You're
under
answering our questions before we start.
Under Object Code 112D, overtime, historically, this account has been underfunded. As we were developing the budget this year, Frank went back and did a historical analysis. And just as an example, in fiscal year 2017-2018, which is the last time we have a full understanding of budget spending, there was $234,419 spent on overtime when $165,000 was appropriated. Scheduled non-certified, substitute non-certified staff is the very same. It's really just bringing things in line with our actual spending. Line 112G, IT administration, looks like a very large change, and really, it's really just a result of realigning things in the budget. The technology personnel in the past has been distributed among 4 different budget line items. There were some who were in paraprofessionals, there was some in IT. What we've done now is to put everyone who is working in IT in IT. Our director of technology has really worked very hard to create a department, and while the computer techs are still part of the non-certified bargaining unit, we've just moved their salaries into a new line item.
Dr. Cronin, back on the substitutes, did we change the daily rate we pay substitutes under this budget?
We have not. No. Under OT, occupational therapy and physical therapy salaries, what we are trying to do, the reason for the increase in this particular line item is that we are trying to provide more services from our in-staff employees by increasing their hours. So we have occupational therapists and physical therapists who work hourly for us. Our efforts are to increase the time we're using them as opposed to contracting with an outside agency whenever we can, and that is at a cost savings. Program development, the money previously budgeted in line 321A has been moved to 322A.
It appeared that was alternate education for special ed.
Yeah, I believe that's it, yes.
I followed I like the budget. I like the way we could actually dig through it and see where the dollars were going. But you're giving us the explanation of your coding system. Help us do that.
Thank you. When I used to receive as a town official the Board of Education budget, I could never understand it.
We have a
And I
similar
spent
feeling.
years trying to understand.
You're on the wrong side of the table.
Budget. I'm not talking about North Haven. I'm just saying. So we try to format that to kind of follow along the lines of what general government does and how you can understand the movements within the different line items.
that's
So
great.
thank you. I appreciate
No,
that.
we love to acknowledge when you give us something that we can actually drill through, and we appreciate it.
Object code 3300, professional technical services. This year, on a trial basis, we contracted and used the services of registered behavioral technicians, which are people who are specially trained in dealing with students with serious social and emotional problems. We brought 4 into the district, and we had eliminated 6 paraprofessional positions last year. These, we did this on a pilot basis. This has actually been very successful.
323A.
And it has allowed us to maintain some of our students in district that otherwise may not have been able to stay. And so we would like to go ahead and continue that program next year.
Excuse me one second. For the board members, that's 323A on what we have here. I don't know why the numbers are different, but...
Oh, it didn't get changed?
Yeah.
It's the second 322A.
Right. Yeah.
Dr. Cronin, what does a non-certified substitute perform over a certified substitute?
Well, a certified substitute will literally take over for a teacher who is absent. So they will provide classroom instruction for the day. A non-certified person is someone who will come in and perform whatever the duties of that person who is out is in the building. Typically, it's supervision on the playground. Sometimes it's supervision in the cafeteria. There is a part of their responsibilities that deals with working with children during the school day, but they're always working with children under the supervision of a certified person.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Under grounds, the increases are really for the maintenance of the new, larger middle school and the turf field. The mechanical 430N, last year this lineup was reduced from 20 rather to 15,000. And then we realized as we were putting the budget together this year that given the new equipment, that we really needed to give additional thought to increasing that repair budget. The account covers repairs for computers, servers, the network, middle school phone systems, the audiovisual repairs and supplies for all of those repairs. And there are 3 things that accounted for largely accounted for the increase in line 5100. So a large portion of that is an increase in additional funds to help defray the costs of students participating in the Future Problem Solvers National Convention. Annually, they go, I believe the site moves in the United States each year. Most recently, I think it was in Indiana. The other thing is that you see the 2 middle school science field trips. Both of those 2 field trips have been in place at the middle school for some students. It just seemed to me that if we were going to be offering that, all kids should have that assured experience in 6th grade and 8th grade. So that accounts for some of the additional money.
So Dr. Cronin, is this line, when you say field trips, does this cover all field trips for all the schools, like elementary? I mean, they used to go on field trips. I could see the middle school, I'm
Right.
familiar with those.
Yes.
So it's
It does as well. We set aside, we budget a dollar amount per child.
Okay, thank you.
Under pupil transportation, 510G is VOAG for the VOAG program, and that's again based on actual costs plus 4% increase, contractual increase. Pupil transportation for magnet schools, the same thing.
Do we have a count of how many students for both of these line items we're transporting?
I do. I don't have it. I'm afraid I don't have it with me, but we can send it to you.
Okay.
Could you forward it through Ed to us?
Yeah, I should, certainly. Library books and periodicals. Last year, as part of the budget reductions, we brought We budgeted $10 per student. This year, we've increased it to 15, which is what it has always been. So we're really bringing it up back to what the appropriation has been for a number of years. The instructional replacement equipment. So $4,000 of this is reallocation of money for special education, special computer equipment. $1,700 is for the purchase of headphones, which we need for student assessments for every child, every student. And previously, each school ordered their own. And our director of technology realized that by doing it in bulk, we will save. And so it's more centralized into one purchase. Last year, we did reduce a number of the athletic requests, and so those are back, including uniforms for baseball, cheerleading, and field hockey teams. And we have uniforms on a 5-year cycle, and so last year was the cycle for baseball, cheerleading, and field hockey, so we've sort of bumped everything back a year. Lacrosse nets, swimming aqua grips, and baseball, equipment. We ordered a new kiln for Mona Luisa's art room. They tell me that it can no longer be repaired. It's been repaired ad nauseum, and so it's time for a new one. And then the replacement for some tables and chairs for Clintonville is just sort of a plan of replacing some older tables. I know specifically at Clintonville in the art room, their tables are sagging. And so I think that Mrs. Dowling is looking to make a change there. New line item 739A. We're requesting additional funds for a swing for the sensory room at Green Acres for the occupational therapist and physical therapist use that. And I just remind everyone that our special education preschool is also at Green Acres. So while this apparatus is used for students in kindergarten through 5th grade, particularly students with autism, that is also used in our preschool. And then for school safety, we've had some administrators requesting additional walkie-talkies.
Is that tying into the police system now?
Yes, we're doing all of that with the police system now. And then as far as leases are concerned, we have new truck leases. I believe this is the 2nd year. There is a reallocation of some money, but a large part of this request is so that we can begin replacing smart boards and Eno boards, which are the technology in classrooms that teachers use for can use for group instruction. They're 13 years old. Many are no longer functioning. They are no longer making them, and they no longer are making the parts. So we're looking to replace those over time. We certainly wouldn't do the entire school with touch televisions. And as we do this, we'd like to also phase in at elementary schools similar things in common areas, not in every classroom, but in gymnasium or in the cafeteria, where large groups, in the library media special room, where large groups of students come together. So those are accounts that I thought there may be some question on, and I just wanted to provide you with a little bit of background information. The other thing that I thought we would do before we start our discussion is that Frank had put together some information on the excess cost process that he wanted to just speak to very briefly. So if he could do that, and then we'll begin our discussion.
That was the 3rd tab, was it?
It's towards the end of the book, after one of the blue tabs, there's a section called Special Education Out-of-District Costs. Right near the end, it's almost the very last section. We want to just touch on this briefly because this is the woodchuck in the pile for the Board of Education, in that it's the one area that the Board of Ed does not have control over regarding trying to manage its budget. Special education is controlled by federal and state mandates. And what we have, when we incur children that are called high-cost children, the Board of Ed has to absorb those costs. I did a quick analysis yesterday. We have 4 children that are costing us over $1 million total. 4 children. The total cost of those 4 children are over $1 million just for those 4 children. And so what happens is the state of Connecticut recognizes that the boards of ed can incur major costs for these special education children. So they have a program called excess cost reimbursement. And the excess cost reimbursement, basically, if you look at the bottom of this page, local placement, if we have one student whose expenditures reach $150,000, the state says your threshold is $74,291. And that number changes every year. It's 4.5 times the basic cost of a student's education. So the state says, North Haven, you have to spend $74,291 before we will start to reimburse you for these high-cost students. So in this case, the excess cost reimbursement should be $75,709 because we've met the threshold. If you turn the page, unfortunately, the state said, yes, we should be giving you the $75,000, but our budget's kind of tight. So we're only going to give you about 70% of what we owe you. So in effect, the state is going to give us 70% of the $75,000, or only $52,996. I'm on page 2 of this description. The balance not reimbursed, the 75,000 minus the 52 is 22,000, which also has to come to the local Board of Education budget. So the bottom line is this: the board has to spend the minimum of the 74,000 plus absorb the portion that the state does not reimburse us what they should be doing. So you add it all up and it becomes expensive for the Board of Ed because it has to eat both below the threshold amount as well as what the state is not reimbursing us. Or in this case here, $97,000 has to come from the Board of Education's budget.
So, Mr. Connolly, is there a cap? For instance, thinking about those 4 students you mentioned, I guess my math says that we should be getting about a $500,000 reimbursement on those. So does the state cap us on that?
The way it works is this: we file for reimbursement, and we've already done that. We file for reimbursement, and then we have to calculate by student. We take the cost of each student, and then we subtract the threshold amount to show us what the formula is, and we do that amount. So overall, we're hoping to receive this year about $1.3 million back.
Is that from last year's?
Right, but my question
current year.
My question is there a cap? So, for instance, on those 4 students, the math is $500,000, which we only budgeted $500,000 last year, I see, by the way. So does the state say, listen, no matter what the cost, we're only going to give you $100,000 a kid, $200,000 a kid, or is it open-ended, they hit the 70% and that's it?
They look at costs. We just had to do a report because our costs had jumped considerably for a couple of students, and we have to justify those costs. I've not seen a cap. I've not seen a cap on that.
Right.
But I've seen costs hitting $300,000 for one student.
And based on the numbers that I think you just gave us, that $1 million, after our initial costs and 70%, state should pony up about $490,000.
Right, that's what I'm saying. We only had $500,000 in the budget last year.
So we just about covered.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's just those 4 students. There's other students that.
Yeah.
So Frank, the 16.5 times 4.5, both of them figures float every year?
Yes. Yes, they go up every year. The state tells us what it is. based on a formula, what they look at, the cost per child. The state has this formula that they work out. So they give us this number.
Why do they give you that number, knowing that they're only going to pay 70%? Doesn't make any sense.
Because that's the state. That's right.
State of Connecticut.
The state, we're all stepchildren of the state, the municipality, so the state does assess the rules there. So it's there are a couple other wrinkles in the formula I just want to touch on. The second portion is that the state has a state placement, whereas the courts can place a child, or DCF can place a child, and they can place a child out of district. And if the state does that, we, the Board of Ed, has to absorb that cost. And the state said, well, but because we're doing it, we'll tell you about it after we do it. The state uses a lower threshold. They use that $16,505 before the reimbursement kicks in. So then the state, so in my example on page 2, one student expenditure of $50,000. The North Haven threshold is $16,505. We should get $33,491 back, but they use the same formula. It's only going to be 70%. So in effect, we wound up paying almost $27,000 for state placement.
How many do we have now in the system that are in state placement?
I wouldn't want to take a guess on that number. I'll get that number for you.
Yeah, do we have a total amount of
Yes.
special ed that?
Yes, we do.
In
Yes.
the different
Oh, yes.
In each of the categories.
All right,
Does these
add another
figures
action
apply
item.
to all towns or just North Haven?
Action item.
The threshold varies by town.
Is that because we're offering something different in special ed?
No, the threshold is based on your average cost for per student, your public cost for all the students, the minimum threshold amount. That is, and that the state calculates that, and that's done for every single town in the state. And so then we plug in our numbers that the state gives us.
If you recall, over time, the past few years, we have asked for additional special education staff in order to begin to build our programs here. And there are two in which we have done that. A therapeutic learning program and then an intensive learning program. And we began those at the elementary level and they run through the high school. Those are saving, and a transition program for students 18 to 21, which we did not have and we were sending out of district. So those all have saved us considerably because we've been able to keep children in district that we might not otherwise have been able to program for.
Is there more programs that we would need that are missing, that we're still going outside for, or does the three that you just mentioned cover?
No, I think that we're always looking to see if there is any way in which we can begin to expand what we have. Right now, I think we're in fairly good shape, and I think we're addressing the needs of our students at this point as best we can.
We filed, get back to the original question, we have filed for 29 students in our filing that we did on October 1st. We filed 29 students. We spent $3.8 million on those students. We should get back $1.9 million, but because of the 70% formula, we're only going to get back $1.3 million.
I just also feel as though I need to emphasize, this is not unique to North Haven.
Oh, no, we understand
we-
that.
This is
everybody.
and nor do we look to find the absolute most expensive premier of whatever it is that we're looking for. We really do look for what children need, but we try to do that in a cost-effective manner. So I know there are those are large numbers being thrown out, but I just want you to know that we really are conscientious about that.
No, they are numbers that we've dug through in the past and have seen. And going back several years when you started with the autism and
Yeah.
bringing it in-house, we appreciate that and we understand both trying to give the student a little bit more and being more cost efficient to the town. We should appreciate when you do things like that.
When do you find out the number of special ed students?
February, is it?
September 1st.
The amount of reimbursement?
No, the total number of students that you have to accommodate. What part of the year?
It varies daily.
Oh,
It varies daily. The special ed students that we have to accommodate, that can change dramatically. You'll be getting your monthly report, the monthly financial report you'll be getting very shortly that we did. And we had a jump in our special education costs from last month to this month. Almost, I forget what that, it's a big number. That between last month and this month, the number of special ed students, the cost for that jumped dramatically. And what will happen is that we file a second time with the state. And by March 1st, we now file a second time. And for students that went out or students that increased, we apply then to that March 1st filing, and the state will reimburse us then for whatever, it's like the adjustment filing, that March 1 filing. The state will then reimburse us for any additional students that have come in, or if they've overpaid us, they'll take some of the 25%, that second payment they're going to give us, they'll reduce it from that payment.
So how does the assessment go up? Is it because they've been tested and it's not just people moving in,
No.
it's the constant assessments?
No, our numbers of students within district, even within our schools, can increase based on referrals and evaluations and that sort of thing.
So, and students can change daily.
Yeah, I understand. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
I don't want people watching to think it's just, oh, people are moving in. That's
Oh,
not.
no,
It's the assessments and tools that you guys are using that's determining this child needs something additional.
All of the above. It's all of the above. And that's why I said the special ed is the woodchuck in the pile, because it's one of the areas the Board of Ed does not have control over.
So, Mr. Conley, how many students did you budget for next year?
For the special ed, the high cost, basically we take the current students, see who's going out of the system under state law and who might be coming in, and we put like a 1 or 2 extra students in there as a buffer. So we look at the breakup of the students and who's going out, who might be coming in, and then we put, I think it's 1 or 2 students that we put back in there to give us a little cushion.
What is the number
What's the
then?
number then?
Do you know what that number is that you budgeted for?
I believe that number is in the low 40s at this point, high 30s to low 40s. And I will get the exact number for you. I'll get that to Ed.
And the last point I want to make on the formula is that the state budgets a flat amount for special ed reimbursement. So when North Haven files for this reimbursement, the state has to see what all the other cities and towns in the state are asking for reimbursement, because that's a fixed pot, and the pot gets divided up by the number of special ed students that are being applied for. So we're estimating right now we're going to be about $1.3 million. And in the financial reports you get every month, when we flag the deficits in the special ed accounts, when that money comes in, we're going to apply it to our expenditures and reduce those deficits to try to keep the Board of Education within its budget.
And that was February, I think, your information, you get the numbers in February.
Yes. Yes, Ed will receive the check and notify us, and then we apply it to reduce our deficits. And when you get this month's financial report, you'll see that those deficits have jumped. But I caution that when the reimbursement comes in, those deficits will dissipate.
Okay. Anything else from your side?
That is everything.
Questions from board members?
One thing that's missing that we usually get is the total enrollment by school.
Okay.
So if we could get that. I have some questions around the technology. So I know the high school is using the Chromebooks. The middle school using the Chromebooks too, or no?
The middle school will be using the Chromebooks at the start of this next school year. There's a lease that's ending on equipment at the high school that is going to be used to lease Chromebooks for the middle school, so it's no additional cost.
Okay, because the middle school, there were laptops purchased.
Right.
So what are we going to do with the purchased laptops?
We still will use those as
Still
well.
use them?
Oh, absolutely.
And what do we have do we still have desktops at the elementary school?
We do have some desktops, but fewer and fewer.
So are they going to migrate to laptops or the Chromebooks?
Actually, every child throughout the district in grades 3 through 12 have their own Chromebook already.
Yeah, I've seen my daughters. But I was just curious at the elementary school, because they always had the desktop.
Right.
And
No, and then every grade has a set of Chromebooks that is shared within that grade. Kindergarten, first and second grade. So there are 3 sets in each building.
okay. That was it for, how many people do we have running technology?
We have,
The IT, administration, and we just heard a IT budget overall for the town, so is there any tie-in between Board of Ed IT versus town IT? And
I don't know if it would be tie-in that's represented in the budget. I know that they work together, the departments work together at times.
how many people do we have?
So we have 4 technicians, which are paraprofessionals, actually. We have the director. We have our network person. And then we have somebody who is a grade higher than a technician, with a bit more specialization.
And they, kind of as we just heard from IT on the town, not only are they doing programs, but they're supporting the data and I was talking about archiving. I don't know if you guys are archiving, but with the amount of students you have that you have to keep records for, that would be, I don't know if you know the answer, that would be something I'd be interested in.
We are trying to move toward that.
Yeah,
more and more.
archiving of the data for,
For example, all of our kindergarten registration now is done online. All of our athletic,
yeah, I know, everything's online, which is,
Right.
There's good and bad. Got to have the right IT stuff.
right.
Anything else, Diane?
I'll let somebody else go.
Mr. Cronin, or Dr. Cronin, sorry, Mr. Conley. So just back on the special ed for a second. So I obviously see we have special ed transportation. So is the rest of the dollars for the students that we talked about in this tuition line $5,600?
$3 million change.
What you run into is that for those other special education students that do not reach the $74,000 threshold, the board has to absorb the full cost for those students.
No, I'm just trying to identify what line is it. Is it in this line here?
The tuition line item,
5,600 to
5,600.
2.5 million.
Okay, so while I'm glad to see that number's going down, it doesn't quite square with the story I heard, because the story I heard was that we budgeted for about 10 more kids next year, and yet this line's going down $500,000.
No, we don't budget for 10 more.
No, it sounds like
We
it's
budget for 1 more, 1 or 2.
1 or 2.
Well, there's 29 students is what I heard we filed for in October, and I heard we have in the high 30s to low 40s for next year.
Well, that was it.
There's a difference. The 29 students are the high-cost students. Those that meet the threshold. The others are ones that don't meet the threshold. There's other special education students that never reach that $74,000 minimum threshold. There's a whole plethora of students that are special ed. So
Right.
there's 2 different categories we're
Right.
talking about. The high-cost students are 29 as of now. And then we have all the other special education students that are receiving the services that we don't file for because they just don't meet the $74,000.
So when I gave you a number of somewhere in the high 30s to low 40s, in addition to those 29, there
Right.
are 10 children that don't meet that threshold,
They don't meet the $75,000.
who are also placed in out-of-district programs.
That was actually my next question, but that number, whether it's the high 30s or low 40s, those are kids that are placed in programs outside of North Haven. Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Pat, you have anything?
Not now.
I have another question. Do we have nurses at all the schools?
We have a nurse at every school.
Because I thought I heard rumblings that they were going to share.
No.
No.
No,
So
no.
nurses at
There
every
is a
school.
nurse in every building.
Jim, anything?
Well, yeah, I got a few things. I recall last year we were sharing teachers amongst schools, music and art. And your cover sheet, you give us the salaries, the proposed salaries for the administrators. I'm wondering why we can't share some administrators. I noticed we have a number of elementary school principals, and it just seems like we're duplicating our efforts in individual schools, but we're able to share teachers, the sole reason why the student is there. We can do that. Why can't we do the administrators?
Well, I respectfully disagree with our ability to share an administrator. A teacher, yes, they are the reason that we're there, and they work with their classes, but then they have no other responsibilities once they've worked with the classes that are assigned to them. An administrator is responsible for the school all of the time. So a teacher that's split between Ridge Road and Green Acres, when he or she is at Ridge Road, they are responsible for the classes that they teach there. That's all. And then when they go to Green Acres, the same. The administrator would leave Ridge Road if we shared, would go to Green Acres, but still would be responsible for Ridge Road. And I think that it's not a good use of our resources.
You spend all the time. Is that 12 months of the year?
12 months of the year.
I see.
Yeah.
Another thing that, this is a general, and I guess I could speak for everybody on the board here, but case in point, last month you gave us your report, and you
Encumber?
thank you, I'm a senior moment. You encumber everything for us. Consequently, last month you encumbered the remaining 6 months of this fiscal year for salaries. And we'd like to know why you do that. Only because we don't know if you're within budget or not. The only time we find out if you're out of budget would be the last month of the year. And it's very, we would explain to us why you wouldn't, especially salaries, dole it out on a monthly basis.
Yeah, let me speak to that. The financial report that you're receiving does include encumbrances, which is a good way of doing it. At the beginning of the school year, we encumber all the salaries that we know we're going to be liable for paying for the year. The balance of the accounts are only encumbered when we cut a purchase order for an item we know that's going to be spent. And if you look at the financial reports we're sending you now and the explanation we're sending with it, you'll see that there are balances of items not encumbered. You'll see a balance, and in my cover memo every month, I explain how much of the budget is spent and encumbered, and I explain the encumbrance. The encumbrance gives us a handle on what we are required to spend for salaries. All the other line items, we don't encumber the money unless there is a bona fide anticipated expenditure, such as bus contracts. We will do an encumbrance to reserve the money so we don't spend it. The encumbrances, if you look at the special ed, the high-cost students, you'll see what those deficits are there because we have big encumbrances for it. But when that money comes in, those are going to get reduced. The Board of Ed monitors its budget every month of the year, but it's not until we get into the March, April, even May timeframe that the variables in the budget start to come together and we see what it is. How much we're getting back for excess costs, that's a big number. as they say, we're anticipating $1.3 million. How many teachers were out during the year that we have to pay for substitutes? What kind of winter was it that affects our overtime accounts? The other items we have control over, what textbooks we buy, what computers we buy, but you have enough variables in this, so it's different than a municipal budget. And so I always advise the boards that, when you get into April and May, you start to have a fairly good handle as to where you are in your spending.
That's exactly what we say.
And the variables there's quite a number of variables. And so what happens is the Board of Ed kind of holds back on its spending until it gets into May, a time frame, and then it sees where it is, how it's going to finish the year, then it's going to spend some of the money they budgeted for textbooks or for computers or other things. So it's a cautionary, conservative approach the board takes until it really sees where it is when all the dust starts to settle. And by April, May, you're pretty much in that time frame because you see what's come back in for the excess cost. You've seen some of these other variables, how many teachers were out ill, kind of a thing. But the money is not encumbered unless there's a bona fide cost or anticipated cost for that item. We don't encumber 100%.
Oh, no, I'm not saying the 100%, but we just noticed the number of line items.
Yeah, I've worked in towns where they did not encumber payroll. And I like encumbering payroll better because it really gives you an idea of what you would anticipate spending. If you don't encumber your payroll for the known positions, in effect, you think you have a lot of money because you haven't reserved that money for your salaries. So it's a good way of doing it. Boards of Ed do it either way.
I think the other thing that sort of plays into that is, as Frank spoke earlier, the unknown every year is special education. And those expenses, we do the best job we can anticipating that. But those expenses can vary wildly. And the one thing I never wanted to do as a superintendent was to come back to you in the spring to ask for more money because we hadn't anticipated some costs. So part of the reason for putting the salaries in is that we know that that's protected, and then we look at what else we need, and some of those other line items we may be less encumbering, so that we know we'd have some resource available.
I got to say, Frank, I like your explanation. You do give this board some insight that we've never had.
Yeah.
Maybe not to the question, but things you've said, at least I'm expanding upon. I understand why certain things happen in the Board of Ed side. And I do appreciate that.
Good, thank you. Again, saying my many years as a town official, I always looked at the Board of Ed and I had trouble understanding what they were doing.
We still do.
So it took about almost 2 years to fully understand the education processes, which are different than the town processes.
You've created a nice bridge.
Thank you.
Do you have generic job descriptions for your principals, or are they tailored per school?
Well, there is a generic job description which speaks to the responsibilities of the principal in general. And then depending on where that opening is, there are specific things that are included in that job description.
So what are the differences between a principal and an assistant principal?
A principal, well, first of all, we're talking about supervision. So we only have assistant principals in middle school and high school, where we have over 700 students in one school and over 1,000 in the high school. At the elementaries, we're working primarily within the 300s. So when you break it down, we could always use additional, but they're able to manage that within the elementary. There are greater issues that need to be dealt with. Discipline problems at the elementary school are very different than discipline problems at the high school. Discipline problems at the high school may require investigating, may require time, on the top of which there is also all of the other business of the school with the curriculum. Our teacher evaluation system is very comprehensive. One person wouldn't be able to do that many staff at either of those buildings. It's a stretch for our elementary principals to do the staff that they have. So for all of those reasons.
Yeah, I have a couple. You actually covered a lot of my questions with your nice overview, but I can tell by what you did. You focus on the percents, and sometimes I like to look at the dollars, because sometimes the dollars are bigger than... so just a couple of items. So the medical insurance, the $468 increase, was that given to you by Brown & Brown?
Yes.
And was that an estimate, or are they, how firm are they in that number?
The numbers are pretty firm. We have documentation for the health insurance. We have actually in writing from our consultant from Brown & Brown, and they give me a specific number, and they look at the anticipated costs, they look at the loss ratio, they look at the employee contributions. For example, in next year's budget, there's over $1.1 million of employee cost share for health insurance. For those of us that have been around for a while, you go back 20 years, and that's phenomenal. There's no co-paying for the municipal or Board of Education employees. And now we're up to $1.1 million employee cost share for health insurance. And so this report that we have here from Brown & Brown goes through all the moving parts. We have reimbursement from the state for retirees. We have COBRA. We have anticipated loss in the self-insurance fund. And so Brown & Brown goes through all the formula, and then they give me a specific number. And this report I have right here now ties exactly into this budget document, so you can fully document what is being asked for health insurance.
Are we running over this year, do you know?
I think this year we're going to be okay. Again, we're in our second year of the self-funded health insurance account, and our losses. Ed and I were at a meeting a week ago at ACES to look at our loss ratio, and both the town side and the Board of Ed side are having a good year, which is really what you want when you're starting up this program, to let the money build up.
Build a reserve.
Yeah, exactly.
I had another question, but I'm going to have to credit Mr. Monaco. The pension, could you just say who's covered by the pension, why the increase is so high?
It's all it's non-teachers, it's all your support staff?
It is the support staff, correct.
And you had a significant increase. Is it the ARC that you were given, or?
I believe that it was
The pension costs are based on actual numbers that Ed gave me for the actuarial study, which you have done every 2 years. So we take the hard numbers. And we have the documentation.
Was this a June study? Did they do another one? Yeah.
Now, who's administering that? Who's handling their plan? Is it on the town?
The administrative employees they have that are covered under the clerical, I think, right, Frank? Are covered under our plan. There's a custodians and clerical are covered under.
They're covering this.
Teachers are at the state level.
So this covers the group that we have administering the.
Yes.
Yeah, you have the two plans. You have the old defined benefit plan, and then you have the newer defined contribution plan, which you switched over for.
Yeah, you got to say the town was 6 years back when it started, maybe 8 years. The town was cutting edge in changing from defined benefit to defined contribution and doing cost sharing on medical. I got to assume we must have led the state on both of them.
The move help you control your costs on pension.
I got one final question for myself, and I'm sure maybe Mike or Pat has some questions. And I don't know that honestly I'm going to be able to get an answer today, but I'll tell you what it is, and maybe we can follow up if you don't mind. There's a lot of conversation on the board last year about the cost of special ed transportation and why it's so high. This is my folder from last year, and I actually have a copy of the contract here. And then this was a listing as of last year by school, not named by child, but of the schools that we were transporting to and the cost. And I guess I just couldn't satisfy myself last year as to why the cost of that was so high, why on certain schools where I know geographically where they are, we are paying so much money. The contract is based on the distance from North Haven and the amount of hours a day. Why we were running, why we were running certain buses to the same school. I think somewhere in here, and this is dated information, we were running, I think, 3 trips a day over to Skiff Street, which is obviously right across Whitney Avenue from North Haven. And honestly, I'm not sure. I know some of these kids are maybe going to ACES, and by the way, there's, as you know better than I, there's the out-of-district special ed transportation and in-district. I don't know why or what the situation is with the ACES buses. They run buses. I see them all over town. So I guess my request would be I'd like to see similar information. Where are we sending the 30-odd children to? What we spent or are spending this year, and why is it? I mean, I think last year,
the contract.
Yeah, I think last year when Tina was here, she said that there are certain situations where buses can't be shared by students for whatever reason, and that may be part of it. But when you look at the amount of money, and I'm talking the gross dollars, by the way, prior to the reimbursement from the state that we're spending, it just strikes me as enormous. And I know last year we just had a lot of conversation about it, and honestly, after the budget session last year, I guess I just don't really understand why we're spending the amount of money we are to transport the 40-odd kids and plus the ones that are in town.
One of the things that we've done this year that hopefully will show a change in that number is that we are collaborating with other towns that go to similar schools.
Good.
The cost is still high.
Right.
The transportation is extremely high. But we are sharing some of those costs.
Good, thank you.
What about the kids that leave middle school and don't go on to the high school and they go to VOAG or wherever?
Yeah.
That's part of that, right? So do we know what that number is too? Because we're responsible for, I mean, you could get it if you don't have it, but that's part of that too, where children who don't go to the high school and go to these alternative schools, we have to pay for that, so it'd be interesting.
We have a breakdown. And those are not necessarily special education students. That could be regular students that go to VOAG.
That's what I'm saying. They're regular students.
Yes.
So
And the
aside
cost
from-
actually went down.
Well, I thought last year we limited that to one school.
Yeah, but I want to see the number, like the number, because right now, in the 8th grade, they start bringing in these schools, and
Right.
the kids are seeing presentations on Plaid Tech and whatever, and then you lose those students to those schools, but we're...
On the second page, if you look at line 510G and 510H, the 43% increase, the 45,000, that's for VOAG
That's for
students.
VOAG, okay.
And then below, the $11,171 increase is for magnet schools.
So it is kind of going up.
And we have limited the number of VOAG schools in which we're transporting to reduce costs.
Isn't 510F the vocational schools? And what is 510G then?
510G is the vocational, the VOAG, the vocational agricultural. So students in North Haven go to Sheehan.
Okay.
And the bus contract is what, 3 years or 5?
5.
5.
And we're coming close to the end of that contract.
And you do have the detail of the breakout on page 12. We gave you, this is from Munis. You notice that all the reports are Munis this year. But on the detail sheets, specifically on page 12, it gives you the breakdown of the regular transportation, the special ed transportation, the athletic transportation, the late buses, the vocational school transportation, the magnet schools. So there's a complete detailed breakdown on page 12 and 13 from the Munis report that shows you what the costs are for each of those kinds of a bus system.
Okay. Yeah, when we get the enrollment, if you, I think we've gotten that in the past, just so we know the numbers of how many students are leaving.
Yes.
Thank you.
Michael, you had something? Good? Pat? Or
Yes, sir.
I'm good?
Oh, eventually. Yeah.
So Bob and Frank, I'd like to ask you a question. Next month, myself and 7 of my colleagues, chief elected officials from across the state, are meeting with the Connecticut Association of Boards of Ed. That's the CABE. And one of the topics of discussion is going to be the purported consolidation of school districts. What are you hearing from the superintendent's side, Bob, on this? Because for the public watching, if this initiative were to go through, we would be merging with East Haven. It would mirror the probate court system merger from about 6 or 7 years ago. What are you hearing, Bob, from the superintendents?
Well, I think that they have some grave concerns. Now, if you recall, I came to North Haven from a regional school district, and by and large, regional school districts have a difficult time getting along, and that they have that because typically there is one large town and there's one smaller town, and so when votes are made, it's typically what the large town wants that happens. One superintendent for East Haven and North Haven is just not imaginable to me. I think that in the districts that do have the regional, they are far smaller, far smaller than that. And just the mandates and the responsibilities from both federal and state mandates that we're accountable for now. One person couldn't do it in both places.
So there's just for the board's edification, it's a two-pronged initiative. Part one is a merger of districts with cities and towns under 40,000 in terms of population. And then there's a byproduct of that, which is those districts that are under 2,000 students. So we fall far over the 2,000 students, but we fall under the 40,000. So it's something that's really captured our attention, not only at cost, at CCM, which you know I'm part of, and now I'm also working closely with CABE, the Connecticut Association of Boards of Eds. So we're going to be very interested to see what the association thinks about this, as this is starting to get some traction, apparently. Oh, yet there's a lot of pushback, like you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. We just got, from the Superintendent's Association, we just got the legislative agenda for the year, and it is all on there.
Yes.
The consolidation of school districts.
What's East Haven's population?
They're about 28,000.
And their student enrollment's probably about the same as ours now. Interesting.
You know what they do in Vermont is the school districts are separate. Of course, it's a much smaller state with smaller towns, but they have centralized administration.
And they do that in Virginia as well, where the districts are huge.
Right.
Michael, you had something?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How are you today? First, I want to congratulate Mr. Stirk and Ms. Mangini on your new positions. Godspeed. You will learn to, eventually, you may like us. On some days, you may not like us, but we are just performing our civic duty. So please do not take anything personally. Dr. Cronin, of course, you know from experience, I deeply respect you, and there's just a lot to what we do together, and some days it's good and some days it's bad. But today is a great day because this is an excellent presentation. This is just mind-blowing here because the improved transparency and detail is what we've always wanted. And And I hope the other department heads look at this video as a training exercise. Plus, there's a cheat sheet here with your major changes. So this is, this is remarkable. So I just want to commend Dr. Cronin and Frank on this presentation. Mr. Connolly, I wish you would delay your retirement and stay, because this is what we've always wanted. On this board here, we don't have a policy per se, but for years the first selectman had a preferred policy of tell us what you need, and we will accommodate your request. And we started off that way, but we learned over time that was sort of impractical in theory, because it assumes that the Board of Finance would blindly support all contractual obligations. And it's frustrating for us because we had no input, there was never any consultation. It was sort of dumped on us. And there were some years of significant increase. We just had to deal with the contractual results, and it was very frustrating for us. So I hope that in the future that there is some greater communication, so that we can somehow give you feedback and you give us feedback in such a way that we at least feel the contracts include the viewpoint of the taxpayer. So, with that being said, the new teacher's contract, which we haven't received a copy of yet, were there any major changes from the prior contract? Because this is year one of the new contract coming up, correct?
In 2019,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And are there any major changes? There were minor, and I'm doing this from memory, and we finished negotiations in December, so, but there were minor language changes, but primarily insurance and salary. Yeah,
so the increase in teacher salaries on your line there of 2.89%, is that strictly the base salary increase, or were there any step increases this year? What account for that increase?
When we assembled the budget this year, we did it by warm body.
Right.
We went through every single teacher, what step they were on. We then advanced them to the step.
Yeah.
We advance them for the overall cost of the contract, but we also, the contract provides if you have a change in degree, you will also get an increase in salary. So we had to go through every single teacher and see, are there any teachers that are getting additional degrees, because that affects their salary?
Yes.
So we had to,
Yes.
so there's all these parts, and that was done teacher by teacher, and we can document the bottom line that's in here and show you exactly the people that make it up in the positions.
Okay, I just meant in year one of the contract, what are the factors of change?
There would be a
that
step
covered
increase. There is a step increase.
There's a step increase.
And
There's a wage increase, there's an increase due to degree.
Yeah.
There's a step increase, and there's also a cost of living increase this year, or not?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Of what, 1% or?
There's a there's a cost of living increase, but if you're at the top of the step, if you're at the top of the salary scale, you don't get a step increase. You're only going to get the cost of living increase.
Oh, okay.
Follow me? So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised that it's only 2.89%, because in the previous contract, during years where there was a step increase and a cost of living increase, it was hard to keep that below 5%. So I hope we can get a copy of that contract.
We have filed the contract with the town clerk's office.
Yes.
We certainly get you additional copies if you want, but it is on file with the town clerk's office.
Thank you. Did you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Allen. I'd just like to state that we worked very closely, I think, back there, very closely with our union this year, as we always do, to take into account what our needs were for the schools, the teachers, and to keep going together and working in sync with the town. And I'd like to applaud the union for helping us and working together with us for this.
Right, 2.89 is, it appears to be reasonable, yeah. So that, but that's, again, I haven't seen the contract, so I just want to know what composed that 2.89. With regard to the administrators, 2.42, that, again, are there step increases there or not?
There are fewer, but there are step increases, and because there are some newer administrators, they are still making their way through the steps, but they reach a level and then that stops.
Right, and of course the other major factor that changes those numbers is, you're right, attrition of the higher salaried faculty or administrators leaving and new hires coming in at a lower base salary.
Right.
So, okay, I see that. And then, of course, there's the bus contract is there too, and that, is that just that 6% increase in the bus contract, which is a number that we're not crazy about here? Are there other structural changes to the contract, or is that just more or less what their cost of operation increase would be?
The bus contract is a 4% increase across the board. The numbers that are in here are based on our analysis of where the buses are going.
How many runs?
But the overall contract provides for, it's a 5-year contract for year 4, and provides for a flat 4% across the board.
Okay, 4%. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
So next year we will be going out to bid. You'll be going out to bid for the bus contract.
Okay, all right. And on the special ed side, which we discussed before, I think that in the past we had looked when we analyzed or we reviewed it, and I think it was the average cost per run was bothersome. When you provide us with some information, regarding the special ed transportation, could you maybe give us an example of what a typical day is in terms of runs? Where how the frequency, the pickup and drop-off locations, and the number of students carried on a given run?
I don't know if pickup and drop-off they'll give you a distance possibly. They'll give you something.
We'll put something together.
I don't want to know pickup and
Well, you don't have to have names of the students.
No, but it's still...
Well, what we got last year, and I can show after the meeting if you'd like, Dr. Cronin or Mr. Connolly, but this is a listing of the schools that we transported to. It gives the dollars of what we spent last year, and again, this is broken down by out of district and in district. Maybe that was, this is what we got last year, right?
Dr. Cronin, the number of runs, or is it the time that it takes to make that run? How do they
Both. It's the number of runs, and the distance of the runs. So, and there are students, for example, that might be in a program that there may be, say, 3 students at program A. One of those students may have to be picked up at noon because he or she is going to something at the hospital. And so that adds a run, of course. And so there are a lot of variables that come into play when you look at the transportation number. It's not really clean, if you will, just going and coming. But we will try to put something together that at least make it a little bit clearer.
So when the contract is written, is it based against time or days?
It is based, I believe that the contract is based on the number of runs, the number of buses that we're using,
The amount of time.
the amount of time that it's taking. I think all of those things are taken into consideration.
I'll get you a copy of the contract. Tim and I both read it.
And then there's the annual percentage increase.
Yeah.
That just is general.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we said it last year. It's just a number that we just can't get our head around.
Yeah.
It's not making sense to us. And we've asked someone to look into it more thoroughly to see if we're missing something. Sometimes just simple explanation can set our mind at ease, and that's all we're looking for.
We have a detailed breakdown by line item, the basic bus contract, the schools that we're going to, the cost per day that the contract spells out, the number of school days that we have to do the transportation, all the questions you're
Why don't
asking.
we can copy that and send it to you.
Copy and send it over. It provides the detail for which we made the budget.
Anything else?
The excess cost grant, the excess cost narrative that's in the book here. In one word, wow. That has never been in here before. That's never been given to us before. Is that correct?
Not to that explanation. We've talked about it, yeah. It's never been explained.
He talked about,
Right. Well, in sort of like a religious pronouncement, where there was once darkness, now there is light.
Amen.
Amen, yes.
Hallelujah.
We have been asking for this for years. It's
Michael, we've gotten it before. I think that one of the differences, the way it was explained, the fact that it's clear that it's just like pilot, it's a pool of money that the state in the ninth hour decides to tell you how much you're really getting, and the fact that you extrapolated enough information to tell us that it's a 70% reimbursement. That we've never had. We've always known what the thresholds were, but we never really knew if the state was holding up their end, and you actually came up with a percentage that makes sense to us. Very similar to pilot.
Yeah, no, this detail, I've never seen this before. This is great. And although I was always confused, I thought that the threshold differences had to do with in-district placement versus out-of-district placement, but it's not.
No.
It's by who does the placement.
It's by student each, and the cost of each individual student, whether that student be in district or out of a district.
But it's actually also by who authorizes the placement, whether it be from us or from a state agency.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, we know that the numbers, a lot of these numbers change all the time, such as the threshold amounts, the thresholds. But that 4.5 figure, where does that come from?
It comes from the state. The state says what the reimbursement's going to be.
So does that number vary, or is that 4.5 has been?
It's been fairly constant for the last several years.
It was 4 before. I recall it being 4. Maybe they did
it has changed over the years, but last several years has been that 4.5 level.
And the 70% reimbursement estimate, is that currently, again, what we're working with this year?
That is our best guess.
Yeah, no, but is that also in place for the current year?
For the current year, that's a guess. We
don't even know what the current year's reimbursement rate would be.
When Ed receives the first payment, we can then calculate what percent the state is using. For the last couple of years, it's been 72%, it's been 73%. We've gone conservative and we're estimating at 70%. We will not know until that money is received from the state. We'll do a reverse calculation to see what percentage.
You don't know until you open up the envelope.
There you go.
So there's no announcement from the state telling you what your percentage rate will be.
It's based on the data that is submitted by all of the school districts, and then
they divvy up
until the state has exactly how many towns are applying for certain students.
With a fixed pool of dollars.
And they divide it out.
Okay.
I like the 70% number. I like the little cushion you put in. We never knew that number.
I think it's a conservative number. Hopefully it'll be a little bit
That's
higher.
fair.
But right now, with my spreadsheet that I've done by student, I use 70%.
Okay. Under health insurance here, by the way, as a member of the health advisory group from this Board of Finance, I want to say we like working with Brown & Brown. Good. They seem to be very clear in their presentation to us, and very logical about how they derive their numbers. I hope that the town decides to use Brown & Brown in the future on the town side of our health consulting. Mr. First Selectman, is there any movement on that?
No.
Let's talk about that.
That's not.
That's this.
Let's finish the Board of Ed.
Right.
That'll be a decision that I'll make, and it's undecided right now, so.
Okay, all right. We often want to know about infrastructure because as beautiful as the new middle school is, some of the other buildings are still aging. As long as the boilers work, we're okay. So the infrastructure as it relates to student population trends, we are going to get some enrollment figures from you, broken down, I guess, by school. Yeah, because, a lot of folks in town, they all often say, well, why does the Board of Ed budget go up if the student population's going down?
Right.
And so, down the road, are we going to continue to have 4 elementary schools, or at some point would Green Acres and Ridge Road be merging? How would that work? And how soon is that down the road?
I don't see that happening for quite some time, if at all. And both schools have vibrant populations.
Yes.
I don't know that we have a building big enough that would accommodate them together. So
right, because as we renovate these buildings or restore them, we're going to have to make these decisions at that time.
I think that personally, I believe that the 4 elementary school model is going to be in place for quite some time to come.
I know, Michael, this is one of the few times we have these people in front of us that we can drill down on other aspects. But just based on time, if we can kind of stay to this budget that we're supposed to be discussing.
And as far as the regional consolidation that the First Selectman mentioned, it's hard for us to see the cost savings there because with the few efficiencies that may be garnered in administrative costs, you're probably going to need another assistant superintendent anyway, or 2, right? For what you mentioned.
Correct.
Here.
Yeah.
But it's still going to require the same number of teachers, the same number of classrooms, and the same number of assistant principals. So, all we're going to be doing is increasing transportation costs of busing people farther distances if we decide to share classrooms and school buildings. So again, I don't see the logic in it for us, for North Haven's case. So I hope that our representatives in Hartford see it the way that I do, that we do. Usually at this time, I also look at the school system in terms of a report card of academic performance and how it's viewed by outside rating agencies. I just want to say I have seen some upswing, some improvement there, and Dr. Cronin, some of the results always lag some of the processes, but the implementation. But I've seen some very good things. So
thank you.
I've been hard on you for years, and so I have to compliment you when I see some.
I appreciate that.
Some good.
In our reference group, just as a point of comparison, there are 27 6 towns in reference group D. And when you take the average per town on state testing, both in language arts and in math, North Haven comes in at number 5. That was not the case always. So we have, people have worked very, very hard to provide students.
Well, you deserve the praise when it's evident.
Well, thank you, but it really wasn't me, it was a lot of others.
Yes. So anyway, overall, this budget has a 2.9% increase, and relative to past years, I see this as very modest and reasonable. You've explained everything quite well today, quite detailed, and so I think that you're being received very favorably here today. So lastly, Dr. Cronin, I want to thank you for your service. I have the highest respect for you, and I wish you well in your retirement. I do apologize for some of the tough times I may have given you in the past, but I want to thank you very much, and I wish you well.
Thank you, Mr. Cronin. Any other board members or questions?
Yeah, I just have a general question. So that was good to hear about the math and language arts, but from your perspective or vision, you had a vision from the moment you came before us of programs and things that you wanted to achieve. Is there anything that you would like to see for the future for the students of North Haven?
So we have, through the efforts of many, we have made significant progress. So in technology, I was very concerned about technology when I started. We have now 2 technology teachers at the elementary level. We have a curriculum beginning in kindergarten with technology. Our reading and language and writing performance has shown significant gains. Math, science with the new standards, I think we are on chart. We are on target to continue to do. My goal has always been continuous improvement, and that's what I've looked for every year, and over 9 years, that's what I've seen. And I am most appreciative to teachers who, the change happens in the classroom. And our teachers, when I listed for you the things that they were asked to do over the past few years, those aren't small changes. And they have been remarkably cooperative with us and followed the lead. So this is a wonderful, wonderful school system. I cannot say that enough, and it has nothing to do with me, but it has to do with the community and its support, and it has to do with the quality of the people you hire. And so thank you for a wonderful 9 years.
Thank you. Dan, that was a great question. We appreciate your service to the town over the years. We wish you the best.
Thank you.
Frank, I wish, great job. I don't want to say what I'm Pam. Boy, you have shoes to fill now. We are usually a reasonable board, reasonable budgets that are presented to us. We always have supported. You can't ask for more. We can't ask for more. So, unless there's anything else?
That's no more religious pronouncements.
This board is adjourned. Michael, did you have anything? Nothing?
It's all been said. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Bob. Thank you.
Good.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.